In Riverdale had always been unpredictable. One day, sunshine; the next, a cold drizzle that seemed to seep into your bones. Today was somewhere in between, the kind of day that made you grateful for a roof over your head and work that kept your mind occupied. I was sorting through reader letters when the doorbell rang. Not the kind of interruption I minded usually. Fan mail had slowed since my last novel came out 2 years ago, but the occasional handwritten envelope still found its way to my door. This one, though, wasn't a letter. It was my son-in-law. Dominic Sawyer stood on my porch, with his hands shoved deep into the pockets of an expensive leather jacket I knew he couldn't afford. His jaw was set in that way I'd come to recognize over the past 3 years. The look of a man who'd already decided how a conversation would go before it started. I opened the door wider. He didn't wait for an invitation. The formalities lasted about 30 seconds. No small talk about the weather or Elodie or how business was going. He got straight to it, right there in my living room, pacing in front of the fireplace like a caged animal. $32,000. That's what he needed. Not wanted, needed. His consulting firm was going under, he said. Clients had pulled out. Bills were piling up. If he didn't come up with the money by the end of the week, everything he'd built would collapse. And Elodie, my daughter, would lose everything too. I'd heard variations of this speech before. Smaller amounts, different crises, a few thousand here for a failed investment, 5,000 there for an unexpected tax bill. I'd helped twice before against my better judgment. The money never came back. The promises always did. This time I said no. The word hung in the air between us like smoke. Dominic stopped pacing. His face went through a series of expressions I couldn't quite read. Disbelief, anger, something else I didn't want to name. Then he stepped closer. I don't remember what he said next. Something about loyalty, about family, about how a real father would help his daughter's husband. His voice got louder. My study door was still open behind me, and I could see Elodie standing at the top of the stairs, one hand gripping the railing. She'd come with him. I hadn't even known she was there. I looked at her, hoping for something. Support, maybe, or at least acknowledgement that what Dominic was asking was unreasonable. But she just stood there, frozen, her expression unreadable. That's when Dominic's hand came up. The slap wasn't theatrical. It wasn't the kind of thing you see in movies where someone winds up and puts their whole body into it. It was quick, sharp, and humiliating. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side and I tasted something metallic. For a moment, none of us moved. Then Dominic's voice cut through the silence, low and cold. He leaned in close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath. "You'll regret this," he said. Not a threat exactly, a promise. I heard something crash behind me. My hand went to my face, more out of shock than pain, and I turned to see Beth's picture frame on the floor. It had been sitting on the narrow table by the door, the one piece of her I kept in the open where I could see it every day. The glass had shattered across her face, spiderwebbing over her smile. When I looked up again, Dominic was already heading for the door. Elodie hadn't moved from the stairs. Our eyes met for half a second. Hers wide, mine probably wild. And then she turned and followed him out. I heard the door slam, then the sound of a car engine starting. Then nothing. I stood there in the middle of my living room, my cheek throbbing, staring at the broken frame. Beth looked up at me through the cracks, her expression caught in that moment 2 years ago, when she didn't know the cancer had already spread. When she still thought we had time. My phone started buzzing in my pocket. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I pulled it out with shaking hands. Text messages. All from Dominic's number. I didn't read them. Not yet. I just held the phone, watching it light up over and over, each buzz a small shock against my palm. The late afternoon sun had shifted, and the room felt colder than it had an hour ago. Outside, I could hear a dog barking somewhere down the street. Normal sounds, A normal day in a normal neighborhood, except nothing felt normal anymore. I knelt down and picked up the frame, careful not to cut myself on the glass. A piece fell away, slicing a thin line across Beth's cheek in the photo. I ran my thumb over it, feeling the jagged edge. $32,000. A slap. A broken picture. My daughter standing on the stairs like a statue. The phone buzzed again and again. I looked at the screen. 7 messages now. Then 8. I set the frame down on the table glass and stared at it. Beth's eyes looked past me toward some point I couldn't see. For the first time since she died, I didn't know what she would tell me to do. The phone kept buzzing. I kept staring, and somewhere in the back of my mind, beneath the shock and the ache in my jaw and the sick feeling in my stomach, a different kind of cold began to settle. Not anger yet. Not quite. Just the slow, creeping certainty that something had shifted. That the man who just walked out of my house wasn't going to stop. That the phone in my hand was only the beginning. I didn't answer. Not that night. I just stood there in the fading light, holding Beth's broken frame, listening to the phone buzz itself into silence. By the time the sun disappeared that evening, my phone had become a weapon. 47 messages. I counted them twice, though I'm not sure why the exact number mattered. Maybe because focusing on a number kept me from focusing on what the messages actually said. Most were from Dominic. Short-clipped sentences that started as apologies and devolved into something uglier. Then longer paragraphs about misunderstandings and stress and how I was overreacting. Elodie's messages arrived between his softer in tone, but somehow worse. She asked me not to tell anyone, said it would ruin everything they'd worked for, begged me to think about the family. I didn't sleep, couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing on those stairs, silent. When morning finally arrived, I knew what I needed to do. Not because I'd planned it, or because some righteous anger had crystallized overnight. I was just tired. Tired of the buzzing phone. Tired of the ache in my jaw that wouldn't fade. Tired of sitting alone in a house that felt too big and too quiet. Catherine Pierce's card was still in my desk drawer, where I'd left it 3 years ago. We'd met at a library fundraiser back when Beth was still well enough to attend those things. Catherine had been the keynote speaker, a criminal defense attorney who'd made a name for herself getting innocent people out of prison. We'd stayed in touch loosely. Birthday cards, the occasional email about book recommendations. I called her office at 8 in the morning. Her assistant put me through immediately, which should have told me something about how I sounded. Her office was downtown, tucked into one of those old brick buildings Riverdale had spent the last decade preserving. The elevator was old enough to have an accordion gate, and it creaked the whole way up to the 4th floor. Catherine met me at the door herself. No handshake, no small talk. She took one look at my face and gestured me inside. Her office smelled like old paper and strong coffee. A mahogany desk dominated the room, stacked with case files and yellow legal pads covered in her precise handwriting. She poured me a cup without asking and sat down across from me. I told her everything. The doorbell, the request for money, the refusal, what happened after. My voice stayed level the whole time, which surprised me. It felt like I was describing something that had happened to someone else. She didn't interrupt, just took notes on one of those legal pads, her pen moving quickly across the page. When I finished, she set the pen down and looked at me. "Did anyone else see this happen?" she asked. I thought of Elodie on the stairs. My daughter. She was there. Catherine's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Will she back up your account?" I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know. And that not knowing felt like its own kind of violence. "I don't think so," I said finally. She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that. "Then we need evidence. Security cameras, neighbors who might have heard something." That's when I remembered. The doorbell camera. I'd installed it the previous spring after a package went missing from the porch. Beth had teased me about it, said I was becoming one of those paranoid suburban types who checks their phone every time a leaf blows across the yard. She wasn't wrong, but I'd kept it anyway. Catherine's expression shifted when I told her. Not quite a smile, but close. You have the footage. On my phone. The app stores everything for 30 days. She stood up. Show me. We crowded around her computer screen, and I pulled up the app on my phone, casting it to her monitor. The footage loaded slowly, buffering in that maddening way technology always does when you need it most. Then there it was. My front door. The timestamp in the corner reading yesterday's date. Dominic walking into frame. I'd thought watching it would be easier than living through it. I was wrong. The video had no sound, but it didn't need it. You could see everything. Dominic gesturing, me shaking my head, his hand coming up, my head snapping to the side, the picture frame falling, Elodie's silhouette at the top of the stairs, barely visible through the doorway, but there. Frozen. Catherine watched it twice without saying anything. Then she leaned back in her chair. "This is assault," she said. Not a question. A statement. Clear, documented, unambiguous assault. And your son-in-law is an idiot for not checking if you had a camera. Something about the way she said it. So matter-of-fact, like she'd seen 1,000 cases just like this. Made the tightness in my chest ease slightly. This wasn't just my word against his anymore. This was real, provable. What do I do with it? I asked. She pulled up a fresh document on her computer. We file a police report. Attach the video. Let them decide whether to press charges. She paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. But I need you to understand something, Desmond. Once you do this, there's no taking it back. Your son-in-law will know. Your daughter will know. This becomes official. I thought about the 47 messages, about Beth's broken frame, about Elodie standing silent on those stairs. "Do it," I said. The rest of the afternoon blurred together. Paperwork. Statements. Catherine walking me through what would happen next. How the police would review the footage, likely issue a citation, possibly an arrest warrant. How Dominic would be notified. How this would become a matter of public record. I signed everything she put in front of me. My hand didn't shake. By the time we finished, the sun was starting to dip below the buildings outside her window. Catherine saved the video file to her computer, then to a thumb drive, then uploaded it to a secure cloud server. 3 backups. She was thorough. "I'll send this to the police department tonight," she said. "You should hear from them within 48 hours. I stood to leave, but she stopped me with a hand on my arm. Her grip was firm, steadying. "You did the right thing," she said. I wanted to believe her. Almost did. I drove home through evening traffic, my hands steady on the wheel, my mind oddly blank. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in the car for a long time, staring at my front door. The doorbell camera was a small black circle next to the frame, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. Such a small thing, such a huge difference. My phone buzzed. Another message from Dominic. I deleted it without reading. Then I went inside, poured myself a drink I didn't want, and waited for whatever came next. The envelope arrived 3 days after I'd sent the video to the police. Catherine's assistant dropped it off personally, a thick manila packet with the county courthouse seal embossed on the front. Inside was a copy of the criminal complaint and a summons for Dominic to appear before a judge. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. The language was formal, impersonal. The people of the state versus Dominic James Sawyer. Charges assault in the 4th degree. Possible penalties up to 90 days in jail probation, mandatory anger management classes. Catherine had offered to have the summons delivered through the sheriff's office. Standard procedure. They'd serve him at work or at home, hand him the papers, and that would be that. Clean, professional. But sitting there with the envelope in my hands, I realized I didn't want it to be clean. I wanted him to see my face when he got it. Wanted him to know that I wasn't hiding behind lawyers or deputies. This was me, choosing to hold him accountable, choosing not to let it go. Maybe that was petty, probably was, but I'd spent 3 nights sleeping poorly and 3 days ignoring messages from Elodie asking me to reconsider, to think about what this would do to her marriage, to please just let it drop. I was done being reasonable. I put the envelope in my jacket pocket and got in my car. Dominic's building was downtown, one of those new luxury developments. All glass and steel, with a doorman who waved me through without question. The elevator was sleek and modern. I pressed 12 and watched the city drop away through the glass walls. Their unit was at the end of the hall. I could hear music playing inside, something jazzy and upbeat. I knocked twice. Hard. The music cut off. Footsteps. Then the door opened, and there was Dominic. He looked different than he had in my living room. Better. His hair was combed, his shirt pressed. No sign of the tension that had radiated off him when he'd demanded money. If anything, he looked almost pleased to see me. "And Desmond," he said, "I wasn't expecting you." He glanced past me, checking if I was alone. Then his eyes dropped to my jacket pocket where the corner of the envelope was visible. "Come in, let's talk," he said. I didn't move, just pulled the envelope out and held it between us. "This is for you." He took it smiling, though the smile had gotten tighter. His fingers worked at the seal, tearing it open with eagerness. He thought I'd brought him a check, actually believed I'd come here to pay him off. The summons slid out into his hand. I watched his face as he read it. Watched the confusion first, then the comprehension, then the color draining from his skin. "What is this?" His voice had gone very quiet. "It's a court summons," I said. "For assault. You're being charged." He looked up at me, and for a second I saw fear. Then it was gone, replaced by something uglier. "You're serious," he said. "Not a question. An accusation. You're actually doing this." "Yes." His hands crumpled the paper. "Over nothing. Over a misunderstanding. You're going to drag us into court over—" "It's on camera," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. Cold. Sharp. Satisfaction curling through my chest as his face went slack. I shouldn't have said it. Knew it the instant the words left my mouth. Catherine had told me explicitly not to tip our hand, not to let him know about the footage until discovery. But standing there in his doorway, watching him try to minimize what he'd done, I wanted him to know. The silence stretched between us like a wire pulled taut. Then Dominic's face twisted into something I barely recognized. He took a step forward, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and cloying. "Did it take a slap to wake you up?" His voice was low, venomous. "At your age, you should know better. Just hand over the money quietly and save yourself the embarrassment." "But no, you had to make this difficult." He kept talking, but I'd already turned away. Started walking back toward the elevator. My hands were shaking now, adrenaline flooding my system. Behind me, Dominic's voice rose. Threats about lawyers. Something about Elodie. A string of words I didn't want to parse. The elevator doors opened, someone getting off on this floor. An older woman with a small dog who took one look at Dominic shouting in his doorway and hurried past with her eyes down. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the garage. The doors slid shut, cutting off whatever Dominic was saying mid-sentence. The descent felt longer than the climb. I leaned against the glass wall and watched the floors tick by, trying to steady my breathing. "It's on camera." Why had I said that? What did I think would happen? All I'd done was give him time to prepare. Time to lawyer up, maybe. Time to come up with some counter-narrative. Catherine was going to be furious when I told her. The parking garage was dim and cool. I found my car and sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. My hands were still trembling slightly, and I gripped the steering wheel until they steadied. I'd wanted to see his face when he got the summons. Mission accomplished. But now he knew about the camera, knew I had evidence, and whatever slim chance there'd been of him taking this quietly had just evaporated. I started the car and pulled out into traffic. The drive home felt longer than usual, every stoplight an opportunity for my mind to replay the conversation. The look on his face when he saw the summons. The way his voice had dropped when I mentioned the camera. My own stupid satisfaction at catching him off guard. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the satisfaction had curdled into something else. Regret, maybe. Or just exhaustion. My phone buzzed. A text from Catherine, summons delivered. I typed back, yes. Didn't mention the rest. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I got out of the car and went inside, closing the door behind me with more force than necessary. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I stood in the entryway, looking at the spot where Beth's frame used to sit, and wondered what she would say about what I'd just done. Probably that I was an idiot. Probably that I'd let my ego get in the way of strategy. She'd be right. Elodie's text came through on a Tuesday morning, 10 days after I'd handed Dominic the summons. Short and formal, like she was messaging a colleague instead of her father. And can we meet today if possible? The coffee place on Maple. No greeting, no explanation. Just an ask that felt more like a demand. I almost said no. Almost typed back that if she wanted to talk, she could come to the house, sit in the living room where her husband had struck me, and we could have an honest conversation there. But something in the clipped tone made me hesitate. I texted back 2 o'clock. The coffee shop was one of those generic places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs, and a chalkboard menu listing drinks with names I didn't understand. I ordered plain black coffee and took a table by the window. Elodie arrived 15 minutes late. When she finally pushed through the door, I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back in a way that made her look older than 36. She didn't order anything. Just sat down across from me and folded her hands on the table. "Thanks for coming," she said. Then took a breath. "Dad, you have to drop this. The charges, the whole thing. It's destroying us." Not an apology. Not even an acknowledgement of what Dominic had done. Just straight to asking me to make it go away. "But he hit me," I said quietly. In my own home. It was a mistake. He was stressed, he wasn't thinking. He asked me for $32,000. When I said no, he struck me. Those are facts, Elodie. Her eyes welled up, and I felt something twist in my chest. These weren't tears of grief or pain. They were calculated, strategic. "You're ruining his life," she said, voice cracking. "He's already lost clients because of the rumors. People are talking. His reputation, our reputation, is being destroyed." "For what, your pride?" My pride," I repeated. The word tasted bitter. What else could it be? He made a mistake. A single moment of bad judgment. And you're turning it into this vendetta. She leaned forward. "We're family. Family forgives. Family moves on." I thought about the 47 messages the night it happened. Thought about her standing on those stairs silent. Thought about how she hadn't called once in 10 days just to ask if I was okay. "Where were you?" I asked. She blinked. "What?" "When he hit me. You were right there, on the stairs. And you didn't say a word." Something flickered across her face. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. "You knew enough to leave with him. Knew enough to text me that night telling me to keep quiet." I was trying to protect our family." "No." The word came out harder than I intended. "You were trying to protect him. There's a difference." Her expression hardened. The tears dried up like someone had flipped a switch. "So that's it. You're really going through with this?" "Yes." She stood up so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. "Fine. But don't expect me to be there when this all falls apart." Don't expect me to pick up the pieces when you realize what you've done." She turned and walked out. Didn't look back. Through the window, I watched her get into Dominic's car and pull away too fast, tires squealing slightly on the turn. I sat there for a long time after she left, my coffee going cold. The messages started that evening. All Dominic. Longer than before. More aggressive. He'd pivoted from apologies to threats, talking about defamation and harassment. How I was the one who'd crossed a line. How his lawyers would tear apart my little video. I stopped reading after the 5th one. Around 8, Gerald called. My literary agent. We'd worked together for almost 20 years. His voice on the phone was careful. Too careful. "Desmond, hey. I've been hearing some things. Online mostly. Some posts on a local forum. About you and your son-in-law." My stomach dropped. "What kind of posts?" "Nothing specific. Just people talking. Saying there's a dispute. That you're making accusations." A pause. "Is it true? Did something happen?" "Yes, he assaulted me. I have it on video. I've filed charges." Silence. Long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. "Listen, I'm not doubting you, but you know how this looks, right? A father-in-law going after his daughter's husband. People are going to assume it's family drama. There is more to the story." He hit me. "I believe you," Gerald said unconvincingly. "I just think you need to be careful. Consider whether this is worth the fallout. The fallout. As if I was the one who'd created this mess." We ended the call shortly after with hollow goodbyes. I poured myself a bourbon. Then another. Sat in my study with the lights off. Beth's picture frame sat on my desk, the glass replaced. She smiled out at me from 5 years ago. I must have dozed off in the chair because when I woke up, weak morning light was filtering through the blinds. My neck was stiff. I reached for my phone to check the time. 7:30, Wednesday morning. 3 new emails. 2 were spam. The third was from an address I didn't recognize, owen.fletcher.1981@gmail.com. The subject line was blank. The message was only 2 sentences. Dominic Sawyer owes me $65,000 from 3 years ago. I have proof. Do you want to talk? I read it twice, then a third time. Owen Fletcher. Nobody I knew. Nobody I'd ever heard of. But he knew Dominic, and Dominic owed him money. $65,000. I thought about the $32,000 Dominic had asked me for. Thought about Elodie's insistence that he was just stressed. Thought about the expensive car and the luxury